Why does perfectionism stop us from almost everything? That's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, this is Jill from the North Woods, trying to improve our lives one small step at a time. There's a great quote from Michael J. Fox that I always really loved, and here it is. The only thing that separates any one of us from excellence is fear. The opposite of fear is faith. I try not to confuse excellence with perfection. Excellence is something I can reach for. Perfection is God's business. I always love that quote. It comes from his book, Lucky Man, and I think that sets the tone for all of this. Perfectionism is really hard. We want to be perfect, and I want to be perfect. I work for a living, and, I put together a slide presentation, and I wanted it to be perfect. And it's not going to be perfect in everyone else's eyes because we all have different preferences. Some people are also better writers, and sometimes people just have different ways of looking at sentences and all that. And so you could spend a great amount of time with perfectionism, neatly lining up your pencils and obsessing over every single thing. And it's tricky. Perfectionism is tricky. It shows up in so many different ways. But sometimes it shows up as procrastination or overcomplicating a project. People will quietly quit about something they care about because it became too complicated, because it's too hard to be perfect. And this is something I know because I've been there myself many a time. John Acuff wrote a book called Finish. Give yourself the gift of done. Now, the book is fantastic. It's one of my favorite books. And he argues that perfectionism is one of the biggest reasons people don't complete their goals. We sabotage ourselves with overly ambitious goals. We make it too complicated and we expect too much perfectionism out of us. I mean, imagine, that you're trying to lose 100 pounds and maybe you want to lose it in 6 months, or you want to write a book in 30 days. And that rarely works out because you've given yourself too short of a timeline, too steep of a thing, and you want perfectionism. Imagine, because I want to lose weight, maybe I'm going on a vacation and I'm going to have to wear a swimsuit somewhere else. If we don't lose the 100 pounds, are we not going to go on vacation? Or if we're trying to write a book in 30 days and it takes us 40 days, is it a big loss? Think about things like that. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky called this planning fallacy, that our bias is towards optimism that underestimates, first of all, how long things are actually going to take. So when we're in the planning stage of something, we think, this is going to be easy, right? I'm just going to, so I got 6 months, and so that's approximately 24, weeks. And if I lose 4 pounds a week, I should be able to do that, right? Or if I'm going to write a book, I should be able to write a book in 30 days. We are optimistic about how long we think things take. That's kind of a different level of perfectionism. And then our goals crumble. We feel like a failure. And it's really the perfectionist rule book that is setting us up to lose almost every time. And so I really highly recommend that book. But then there is Brené Brown's book. She kind of gives a little bit different take on it. This is called The Gift of Imperfection. And Brené adds this other layer to it, saying that perfectionism is not the same as striving for excellence. And the reason I like these two books together is, one book is about setting yourself up for failure right at the get-go of a project. But then you feel bad, like, shouldn't I be perfect? Or if I'm working on a PowerPoint for work, shouldn't it be perfect because I'm showing it to other people? And it makes you feel uncomfortable when you sort of give up on this idea of perfectionism. And what she talks about is how we should strive for excellence. Excellence is about growth and mastery, but perfectionism, on the other hand, is about earning approval. She's like this 20-pound shield we carry around, thinking that it will protect us from blame and judgment and shame, having a coworker pick apart your work if I could just be perfect. And I would love to tell you that I would love to be perfect, and I'm just not. And particularly understanding that, when it comes to writing, it is not my forte. I am better at tech things than I am at writing. I'm better at other things. I am better at, working with human beings. So I know in the back of my head my writing's not going to be perfect, but does that mean I should give up on excellence? So, that's the thought. So the truth is that if we are carrying around this shield thinking it's going to protect us from criticism from other people, the shield is too heavy. It keeps us from moving forward. And what Brown says is that the core of perfectionism is really shame. So on one side, we're looking at it as setting up our projects for failure through perfectionism. And in this case, we are trying to avoid shame. We are trying to avoid being embarrassed by our coworkers, being picked apart by our projects. And if I could just look perfect, work perfectly, live perfect, I won't feel any shame. I won't feel any rejection. But instead, what it does fuel is it fuels shame because the bar keeps, first of all, moving. And secondly, there's no such thing as perfect. So you could, let's say I wrote the perfect PowerPoint. It is amazing. Every dot, and I think it's great. I think I laid it out perfectly. Someone else is going to look at it because they just have a different perspective in life and say, oh, no. Don't organize it like this, organize it like that. Now you have shame because you couldn't read every single person's mind and figure out what they were going to say. And to be honest with you, there are people out there in the world that no matter what you do, no matter what you present to them, they will always have something to say. There's kind of this funny meme that's going around like on YouTube and Twitter and all these places where, and there's videos of it, and someone put together a clip of all these videos where a husband and wife are going grocery shopping, and the wife is picking out produce. It might be plums. It might be, something. She picks out, the perfect plum, and she hands it to her husband, who's supposed to put it in the bag, right? So that's what his job is to hold the bag while she puts in the perfect plums. What he's doing is he's taking the plums out with the other hand, and then he shows it to her and says, well, what about this plum? And then she's like, no, I don't like that plum. And then she puts it back into the file again. It was the plum she picked out. So even if you do a great job, even if you do the job that that other person wants you to do, chances are they're going to probably cut it down anyway. And so then now you feel just doubly bad about the whole situation. John Acuff offers a couple of practical steps when it comes to perfectionism. And I like some of his steps. Is first of all, cut your goal in half if you can. Sometimes at work we can't cut our goal in half. But you can cut your goal in half or you can double your timeline. So if you're planning on losing 100 pounds in 6 months, which is clearly not possible, what about 50 pounds in 6 months? Or if you're trying to finish painting a room and you say, I'm going to paint this room by the end of this year. We got, 3 more months of this year. Could I just give myself an extra couple months? Or could I just say I'm going to paint 2 walls? But the idea is that when you finish early, it feels like a win. If you finish the amount you're supposed to finish, it feels like a win instead of repeatedly feeling like you failed. Failing just makes you feel like you're just not enough, like everything you do isn't good enough. And so you want to set yourself up to succeed. The other thing is that you don't have to be great at everything. The term was strategic incompetent. So during the pandemic once, I stayed up late worrying about wrinkled laundry. I don't know why. It just kind of hit me at that moment. And it suddenly struck me, Jill, people only see you from here up. No one's going to see that your linen pants were wrinkled. Oh, you're right. Fine. Just have wrinkled pants for now, right? So the idea is that that there are things that you're not going to be good at, that you plan for it. You just plan for the fact that you're just going to have wrinkled pants because maybe no one's going to see me for a few weeks. Why am I stressing about that? Sometimes good enough really is just good enough. But what you do is you plan for it. You figure out what the good enough is. Instead of letting good enough just happen to you, you know where to put your energies and you know where not to put your energies. And, there are times where you could have a very, I would say, official-looking agenda. Maybe you don't have time for that. And maybe just a Word document with the agenda written up, in bullet points, good enough. Maybe, but those are the things that you need to figure out. When is good enough good enough? And then there's this idea of parking a lot for projects. And they're great. I don't know if you've ever been in project management before, but let's say, I'm a software implementer, right? I have worked my life implementing software. And so there's this integration that my last software had that everyone really likes, but it always ties everybody up. And so people will be like, well, Jill, why don't we just, work on getting this integration also up and running at the same time? Because it'll boggle everyone down. It will cause too much work. And that means that then they're not going to finish the work we really need to get done. You put it in the parking lot. So it doesn't derail the project. Imagine like this, that if you, you needed to clean your house. My house is just a mess. I just need to do this. I got floors. Like I'm working on getting the floors redone in my house. I would love to tell you that I'm going to get every floor in this house redone all at the same time. I don't have that kind of money. And so a friend of mine is actually helping me redo the floors. And she says, well, where do you want to start? And suddenly I realized I'd like to start in the places where I have company. So that's going to be downstairs in my living room, my dining room. That'd be nice if that area was all cleaned up so that when I have guests, because not many people are coming up in my bedroom. And not many people are coming up here in my recording room. I mean, it's kind of someday I'll have to show you this, but I have like auroras and clouds. It's kind of a fun little room to show people, but this room has carpeting. So let's not start upstairs. Let's start downstairs. Everything else goes into that project parking lot. I can do that later. If you're looking to clean your house, like I said, maybe you start with the kitchen because cleanliness is good health. And you clean the basement last because honestly, who goes into the basement? That's one way of doing it. The other thing that you can do is try to make goals more fun. Can you do, I don't know. Like I did this exercise program with all of us where, in the wintertime, it's hard in North Woods to exercise because it's always indoors. It's very cold outside. And what I did is I created this sort of exercise your way across Hawaii. And so I made this map that went all the way through the Hawaiian Islands, and everyone would tell me how much they exercised, and I sort of calculated it into miles. And then I would tell them a story about their trip to Hawaii. Oh, now you went to Hanama Bay, and you saw the snorkeling, and afterwards you had pork and pineapple, whatever. The idea was I tried to make it fun. I tried to do something really enjoyable. My old gym, had this climb the Himalayan mountains. And so they had people get on the stair climber, and then you were supposed to write how many feet you went up every time so that you can make it fun. But the way that you can make any goal a little bit easier and to get your brain away from perfectionism is to make it more fun. Because if you're having fun, you're not thinking about perfectionism, and it's just not destroying your project. And going back now to Brené Brown's book, this is where her voice dovetails with this idea. She reminds us that the antidote to perfectionism isn't working harder. It's self-compassion. It's talking to yourself like you're going to be your best friend. Instead of beating yourself up for not being perfect, acknowledge it. And that courage to take up and show up imperfectly is huge. So the idea is that most time people don't notice things, to be quite honest with you. If you had just a Word document with the agenda in it, most people wouldn't think twice of it. Or if you are, let's say you're working on some kind of an art project. So I knit a quilt thing that's kind of over there. And at one point, the lady says, well, your corners aren't perfectly mitered, meaning they're not quite sharp at the edges. And you know what? I sewed a quilt. I'm perfectly happy with this quilt, even though it's not perfect. I just enjoyed the whole process of learning how to sew a quilt. So that's what you would tell your best friend, right? If your best friend brought you a quilt, they just took a class and then sewed, and they said, well, the corners aren't perfectly square. You'd say, are you kidding me? This is great. You made a quilt. That's what you would tell your friend, and that's what you got to start telling yourself. That's what you got to start, to tell yourself instead of beating yourself up all the time. And then I think we have to look, too, where we have hidden perfectionism. This is one of the most eye-opening things for me when I was reading these books, is that sometimes I would get at a project, 70% of the way through, And then I would sort of stall, not so much with work because work is work and I have to get things done, but with home projects. I just would never finish them. And I couldn't figure out why I would get 70% done with a project and then I would just quit. And what Brené Brown said that was kind of interesting is that if you quit, it can't be judged, right? If I never finish the quilt, you can't judge me for my bad corners. You're avoiding being judged by just never finishing. And that is what you would call a sneaky perfectionism trick that she calls self-protective move against shame. That's the idea that we are protecting ourselves from having criticism or imagine, like I said, I'm going to, paint the 2 walls in this room. And then I find out I'm not very good at painting. And so I sort of paint one of the walls and then I don't finish. And then the paint dries out. And then I say, oh, well, I totally would have painted this room, but the paint dried out. And so it's not my fault anymore. I'm sort of protecting myself. It's the paint's fault because it dried up. So it is a move against shame. So I think we have to think about that from time to time when we can't finish a project or we're getting too wrapped up in perfectionism. Sometimes, like I said at the beginning, it's avoidance. It's procrastination. And we do that in order to protect ourselves. John Acuff, going back to him, calls them secret rules, made up standards that when we create them, we create it so that we can sabotage our own projects. If I can't work out every day of the week, then why even work out at all? Or if I can't pay off all my debts, in a year, why even bother trying? Why even be on a budget? Because I just am never going to get there. I've done that with dieting before too, where you feel like I have 100 pounds to lose, and if I can't lose 100 pounds, why even bother doing anything? These rules sound rational in our head, but all they are sabotage. All they are is us finding a way of using perfectionism against us doing anything. And, he says that data helps us pierce those lies. I've had times, like I said, where, the scale wouldn't budge. I was trying to lose weight and the scale wouldn't budge. And I wasn't going as fast as I wanted to. Maybe I imagined I was going to lose 2 pounds a week and I'm losing half a pound a week. And so I'm like, oh, I'm failing. I'm not losing weight. Oh no, what's wrong? But instead, I was lifting heavier weights. I was getting stronger. My pants were, I was needing smaller pants. I had longer stamina. I could go for hikes and go for a longer period of time. And I felt pretty good about it. So while perfectionism was whispering, Jill, you failed. Your scale is not moving like it should. The other data is whispering back and saying, take a closer look. You're succeeding in so many ways. And so when you're thinking about this particular thing, can you find other data to prove that this voice of perfectionism is absolutely wrong? And sometimes just having honesty with other people can help you a lot, particularly when you're working on work projects. I confessed to a boss once that I had stalled on a project because I just didn't know how to bring it up to the next level. I said, I've been working on this project for a while and I really wanted it to be spectacular. And instead, I'm just kind of stuck at it being okay. And he just looked at me and he says, well, bring it to me. Bring it to me and let's work on figuring out the next step together. A simple act of vulnerability, of asking a question, of asking for help, eventually gave me the ability to finish the project in a great way. I was stuck, but 4 eyeballs was better than 2 eyeballs, and we got it unstuck. I'm one of those people that I struggle to ask for help. And you know what, my boss now, she's so amazing. I get stuck and I'm just sitting there spinning and I'm trying to write this thing. And she goes, well, let's just have a meeting quick and let's just see if we can't figure out, how to finish this together. She's wonderful at this and I'm terrible to ask for it. And I'm trying to remember more often to ask for that kind of help. You would help your boss if she asked for help. Why don't you think about asking, another person to help you? So my challenge in all of this is for you to look for ways perfectionism is really spoiling things in your life, whether it's you as a parent, whether it's you as a spouse, or you at work, or how you manage your health or your budget. You have to ask yourself, what would happen if I chose good enough? Or if I chose another path, or I chose to bring someone else in with me to help me? We have to let ourselves not be seen as perfect, but being seen as human. We are all humans, and there are good points to us and bad points to us, and things we're good at and things we're not good at, and things we're going to get right and things that are going to get pretty darn good. So in the truth, perfectionism doesn't build connection. It doesn't help us make great projects at work. It doesn't help us in our home life. You know what it does? Vulnerability, excellence, joy, fun. Those are the things that bring quality to whatever project or thing we're working at. Brené Brown said that perfectionism is self-destructive because it doesn't exist. But self-compassion, that'll take you farther than any type of perfectionism ever could. I worked for a startup, and I think it was good for me to work for this software startup because it's us against the world, right? We're trying to build a product and have customers buy it. And a lot of times we would knock out a new feature of the software that was pretty darn good. It just didn't have every feature that every customer would always want anytime. We couldn't let perfectionism crush our software. Instead, we would add it on later. We would fix it up later. We would add features as people used it and thought of new things to add for it. We could have let perfectionism crush our company, and instead we had to go. And that's what this is really about, going, doing something, maybe something pretty darn good. I was watching this movie that I really love called About Time. I did a whole movie review of it in the podcast. And it says that, quote, "We're all traveling through time together every day of our lives. All we can do is our best to relish this remarkable ride." And I think that that's the most important thing. All right, everyone, thanks so much. Appreciate you listening. Remember that, perfectionism should never rob you of finishing, growing, or getting somewhere. I hope that if you have anything to say to me, you can email me at jill@startwithsmallsteps.com. Please remember, I have all of my podcasts either on video on YouTube or in podcast form, whichever way you like. And Buzz Blossom and Squeak, that's another podcast I do. It's about exploring nature right outside your front door. Not deep dive in science, but just appreciating the world around us. Thanks so much and have a great day.